an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sex Education, Season 2, Episode 5. In this episode, everybody is having their hearts broken. It's really rough, you guys. It's just, there's like a couple minor victories. And I'm really happy that Maureen is dumping her husband. Yay. But like for the most part, ouch. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. This episode, guys, it was just so full of, again, it's a lot of what should I be doing? Who should I be liking? And I'm pleased with how unexpected a lot of it was, despite me, hoping for certain things. I didn't expect them to happen, and then there were other things that I got very wrong. So let's talk about the main, thrust of this episode, pun intended, which is Remi. Remi, straight trash. Remi, I had thought he was here to just kind of, ride Otis's mother's coattails. And it wasn't even that deep. It was even more shallow and pathetic than that. So, the whole reason, as it turns out, that he's here is because his wife has kicked him out and he has literally nowhere else to go. And Otis, figures this out by the end of the episode and feels like a real idiot for ever thinking that his father wanted to spend any time with him at all. And we get the first mention, I think, of Delilah this episode. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. But I don't think I knew Remi was remarried. I certainly didn't know that he had children with her as well. He has a couple little boys, it sounds like. And later on, when he is in the car with Jean, he says, "I want to be a good father." And Jean says, to which children? And the way she said that, for me, makes me think that those aren't the only kids he's got either. Which would make sense if a guy is out here fucking women the way that he is, that he would have a lot of children dotted around. And I wonder if Otis knows about any of that. This is something that I have always sort of wondered about myself, is if I were to have children with, say, Owen, and we got a divorce, how would I talk about Owen in front of the kids? Probably a better example would be Brendan, since we are actually divorced. Owen, it's hard for me to imagine what bad thing I could say about him because he's just a delight. But Brendan, there are some things I could say. However, Brendan was never, abusive to me. He was never a bad person. He was just really thoughtless and clueless and in his head to the point that I couldn't get through sometimes. He was a lot like Otis, actually, in a lot of ways. And so I don't think it would be too much of an issue with somebody like Brendan being the ex. I think keeping my mouth shut wouldn't be too hard. But when you see somebody like Remi, it's really clear Jean has not told Otis most of what the deal is with Remi, which is sort of interesting because Otis saw his dad cheating, literally saw the man fucking another woman. And still, despite his own hang-ups with sex because of that trauma, he doesn't seem to hold it against his father the way one would expect him to do. And I think maybe that's partially because Jean hasn't told him a lot. So he probably has been laboring under this assumption that that was a one-time thing And we see the fight that Jean and Remi have after that, where she's yelling at him that you had your cock in another woman, and he's saying that she's overreacting. And I wonder if Otis, saw his mother freaking out and already had, this sort of hero complex with his father, and so he was inclined to believe his father when he said that she was getting upset over nothing. Because, it's interesting to me that the reaction his mother had, how hurt she obviously is, and the fact that this leads to the dissolution of their marriage, one would expect, at least I would expect, that Otis would blame his father a lot more than he apparently does. And it's not like he blames his mother exactly. But he's living with her, and there's a resentment there that has had a lot more time to grow and change. And I'm just a little bit surprised at the fact that he has maintained such a positive mental image of his father. Because for a lot of people, well, true, Ashleigh says probably because he also gets the opportunity to see his dad so infrequently. Yes, but one might see the opposite happen, where if somebody finds out that their parents split because one cheated on the other, and then they get whisked off and don't see that parent very often, that begins to become the focal point of what you know about that parent. Oh, they're the one who cheated, and I saw them literally in our house fucking that person. Not only fucking that person, fucking a client, which is so extra gross, a patient. But no, it's Otis still really admires and cares about his dad. And it must be really hard for Jean to not talk shit and let Otis come to his own conclusions. And I have said it before, and I will say it again, that is the kind of thing that I imagine is the hardest about being a parent, is that you have to stand back and let your kids fuck up and find out. They have to learn for themselves, and you can't tell them everything. You can try, but you have to know it's not going to work, because did it work on you? Of course it fucking didn't. Kids have nothing but older people trying to tell them shit all day. Only some of that's going to fucking stick. So otherwise, you just have to sit back and believe that this person is so consistently who you think they are that it's just inevitable your kid's going to figure it out. Because there's no hiding it. It's just that you have to be patient in allowing them to get there themselves. And I just can't imagine, in some ways, what a relief it must be to Jean when she goes and picks them up and sees how disappointed Otis is. I'm sure it breaks her heart, and that's what's awful. You have to let them figure it out on their own. And so there's a tiny part of you that feels a little bit vindicated because you can tell that they know now. But they had to know at the expense of their heart. And that's not something you wanted for them. That's the point of trying to tell them, is you want to spare them that, but you can't. You have to allow them to get their heart broken, because that's the way that you learn. You can't possibly absorb a lesson that you don't feel viscerally. So I just imagine Jean's sense of sort of satisfaction, but the overlying sadness because it finally happened that her ex let her son down the way that he let her down. And she knows what that's like firsthand. And she's just been kind of waiting for it. With this dread, I'm sure. And sorry, there's a bunch of chat here. Ashleigh says, yeah, he's the worst. Christine says, my parents split when I was older, but both parents try hard not to talk bad about each other, which is a lot considering my dad cheated. Same situation then. Christine, I really think it's all how the parents handle it and each other. Ms. T says, I find it hard work, but totally worth it and non-negotiable to talk positive about their parent, about my kid's other parent. And Christine says, and we always do figure it out. I will never forget learning about what my dad did. Ms. T says, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And this is so interesting too, because I was in this position as a kid where my parents didn't hide much. Even when they tried to hide it, I knew, my mother had an affair that was ongoing for many years, and I knew almost the whole time. My dad struggled with drugs and trauma, and I knew about that the whole time. I was aware that my dad was probably either gay or bi and really like fighting that and judging himself. And it's wild to me to imagine not knowing these things and finding out later as an adult, because that's what happens to a lot of people. They find out stuff once they're old enough for their parents to feel like, okay, now I can tell you. But I think due to the fact that my parents were so young when they had me, and there was a language barrier with my father, and my mother was just a wreck, that they didn't have the kinds of like mechanisms that a lot of parents do to shield their kids from that stuff. So it was never hidden for me in the first place. I grew up knowing all of that, which is part of why I think I'm a little bit codependent these days. Cause as a kid, I grew up being hyper aware of the pain that they were both in. But yeah, with Otis, he's so excited, and that's what's so hard. This episode starts off with his dad coming to pick him and Eric up for a day out camping. And Eric, as usual, is just game for anything. He's got total faith in Remi. He is so excited. He doesn't realize that they're genuinely going like hiking and stuff, and so he wears a total wrong outfit for it. But nevertheless, and on the way there, what we find out later is that everybody in that car is in denial about what's going on in their personal relationships. So we've got Remi, who is hiding the fact that his wife kicked him out. And he tries to make it later when he's talking to Otis, like she left him for someone else, which is just so extra gross. Like, Remi is just such an utter piece of shit. Like, and in a very believable way, that even when he finally confesses that things have gone south with her, he can't take responsibility for him being the one. It's always got to be that she left him and he's the victim. Like, it's just ew. But we don't know that yet. So he's still in the midst of hiding that. Eric is still dealing with the fact that Adam is like showing up at his house, and he when he talks about it to Otis, he makes it sound like this has happened a few times. So, because otherwise it would feel as if maybe he had only had that one time with Adam. But later on, when he runs into Raheem says something like, "Are you done ignoring me?" So it's been a few days, it seems like. And the fact that Eric just decided to like ignore Raheem is really not great, Eric. I'm a little disappointed in you, buddy, that that's how you decided to deal with that, but I guess. And he's getting texts from Raheem, but isn't answering them. Right in front of Otis, who asks him, like, what's the deal with that? And Eric tries to say that it's because he doesn't want to become one of those people who, like, gets a boyfriend and then just ditches their friends. But, it's the fact that he isn't talking about Raheem at all is really the giveaway. It's one thing if you're just ignoring texts, but you're talking about that person and sharing with your friend. He's not talking about him, and he's hitting, the ex. Yikes. And Otis is getting texts from Maeve, who is saying that she is confused and doesn't know what to do, thinks that they should talk, because he's still grappling with what Ola has asked of him, which is to cut Maeve off. And they head into this camping trip with this series of secrets. They go on a hike and don't set their camping stuff up right away, which I found it interesting here how Otis is sort of portrayed as being the uptight one, but he's like definitely right in all of these scenarios. This is the kind of thing where being overprepared and being uptight is not always useful. Granted, Otis is in his head so much. Ola says that later, and she's 100% right. That said, there are times when being overprepared and in your head is incredibly useful. And being out in the wild is one of those times. This is, I mean, the whole Boy Scout fucking slogan is be prepared. And, guys, this is sort of like, oh man, I'm going to tell you a very short story here. When I first moved to Texas, Owen really wanted to go camping by the beach, and there's this place in Galveston that it's very inexpensive, and the campsites are right by the beach, and it was a great location. And so what we decided to do was spend 2 nights camping, and then 1 night at this pretty expensive hotel to sort of recover from camping, because you guys know, camping is actually a lot of energy. And we went down there, and it was one of those cursed trips, which really, it felt like that was all I ever had for a good stretch of my life. Every time I tried to go on a trip, something went really badly wrong. So the drive to Galveston is like 6 hours from here. And we started our drive, and about 3 hours in, our air conditioning died. And we were driving on a Sunday, so fucking nothing was open. And we managed to find this place that was pretty far out of the way to repair the air conditioning. It took a couple hours, and it was like $380. Took most of the money that we had set aside for our trip itself, which was a huge bummer, and set our timing way back. I was not aware until Owen told me as we got back on the road, not even before, guys, on the road, that he had agreed to meet a couple of his friends for dinner in Galveston because they were just going to happen to be there also. But the thing was, they were friends that live literally a half mile from where we live. So it wasn't like we were never going to see them if we didn't go to this like dinner with them. It was literally just having dinner with them somewhere else because they were going to be there and Owen just felt like we should. And I was already really stressed about how much time we were going to lose because we had to get a repair. But he didn't want to break our date. So we didn't arrive at the campsite until about 7 p.m. Dinner was supposed to be at 7:45. So there was no time to actually set the tent up or anything if we were going to make this dinner on time. And we had to unload our car, change into something for a nice restaurant. We went there, the food was not good, and it was a fortune. And then we came back to our campsite, and it was totally dark. There was a couple of lights, but, you know, campsites, like, they're not well lit. That's not the point of them. And we had to set up our whole tent and our whole site in the dark in, like, dress clothes. And because we could have gone to change, but the changing rooms weren't lit, so it was pitch black in there. And I had this sort of, like, fear of it because I was just like, I bet there's so many spiders. I just don't want to go in there. And it wound up being absolutely miserable, setting all of our stuff up in the dark with other people around us who had gone to sleep already, obviously getting a little bit irritated at the amount of noise that we were making, setting camp up because they were ready to fucking turn in for the night by the time we got back. Oh God, you guys, it made me so angry. That's one of those things that Owen will joke about how I will never let him forget it. And he is 100% correct about it. I tried to argue with him that this was a bad idea, like from the start, and he did not want to hear it. And it just had such a ripple effect. And he wound up in the dark turning his ankle. So the whole rest of the trip, he was in pain walking around. And it was like a good quarter mile, maybe more, from the campsite to the beach itself. And there was no way to get there. You know, it's not like he had to walk on it. So just overall, this whole trip with Otis and Eric, and the fact that this dude is obviously lost but won't listen, like, oh my God, I just related to it so hard. It's really difficult when you're watching somebody make such an obvious mistake and they just won't listen to you, you know? And especially because you know that later on, it's going to bite all of you in the ass. And they are going to be embarrassed, but you know that, like, it'll be too late. Because there are some times where somebody being proven wrong you can get a little satisfaction out of it still. It's like, yeah, it all sucks, but I do enjoy seeing your face now that you realize that that was a very bad idea and you should have listened to me. But this wasn't even one where being smug was any fun, because he was obviously so miserable also. And by he, I mean both Remi and Owen. You know, Owen wound up literally hurting himself. And Remi is just like completely losing it on this tent that's supposed to be a pop-up tent, which doesn't work. And it's interesting because on the way in, when he's like reassuring them that he totally knows what he's doing, Eric asks if he goes camping a lot back in America, and he says yes, and that Delilah and him like to try and get the boys out into the into nature as like often as they can, something like that. And first of all, there's a moment of Otis's face falling, because I think just the mention of this guy having other kids is just tough for him. He feels like he wants a relationship with this man who has a whole other family going on, and the reminder of that is just difficult. But also, I can't help but think Remi is just a fucking liar, right? Like, he's lying about so much. So he's definitely lying about ever going camping, right? Because, like, he pulls this tent out, and there is just no indication to me that he has ever even used a tent in his entire fucking life. Like, he genuinely doesn't know what's going on here. So I am assuming all of this shit that he's claiming has gotten so much wear is fresh from REI, has the tags still on, and he's just acting like he knows what the fuck is going on. And there's a couple of moments, like, first, he offers both of them a flask, and Otis is like, hiking and drinking don't feel like a good idea. Which, like, yeah, if you had a path, and if you had a camp set up already, then I would be much more inclined to be like, yeah, it's fine, probably, Otis, like, don't worry about it. But they aren't setting shit up. They're just wandering. That's not a good combo. Totally agree. Wait till you get to your site at the end of the evening, and then you have your drinks. Like, it's fine. And then he hears a nightingale and points it out, and it's very clearly just a crow. And at first they try and like go along with it, and Otis just points out like, that's not a nightingale. And Remi just sort of looks embarrassed and moves along. And eventually it begins to pour down rain. And when they get back to the site, they're still going to like try and set their tents up in this downpour, which, like, this is just the kind of thing that really, for me, hammers home how I am not somebody who is about this life. For me, day one, it's pouring like that. Camping's canceled. It's that simple. That's it. The point of camping is to be able to sit outside with a fire, roast some marshmallows, chat amongst each other. It's one thing if it rains within your trip. You have a couple nights by the fire, and then the third night you get rained out. Fine. Happens. You can be in your tent all huddled up together, telling spooky stories, whatever. Day one, and your equipment ain't set up, that's a wrap for me. That's it. I'm out. Like, no question. Not even a moment's hesitation. I'm just grabbing my shit and going back to the car. Like, nah. Being outside is already uncomfortable enough. Adding an inch of water on the ground, that's just too far. I'm sorry. Gotta draw the line somewhere, kids, and that's where I draw mine. So finally, they convince him to get a motel room instead. And you have this moment of him flirting with the lady at the front desk. Janine, I think is her name. And to Janine, I just want to say, raise your standards, honey. What are you doing? What are you doing? Janine, you're very attractive. You can do so much better than this fucking clown. What is it about him that got you even interested at all? He wasn't even charming. He was leering. He's attractive enough, like, but not really. Girl, no. So they go into their room, and Otis and Eric have their sort of heart-to-heart about what's going on. But each of them tells them some shit that they don't want to hear. Eric confesses about what happened with Adam to Otis, and Otis is horrified, which, I mean, you know, like, we all were kind of feeling this a little bit. Just saying, dude, he was incredibly harmful to you. He was abusive. And now y'all aren't even, like, publicly together. He's just keeping you secret, locked away somewhere, which is also, like, really a red flag. How are you okay with that? And Eric later on tells Otis that he didn't tell him because he thought Otis would be really judgmental about it. And Otis has to admit Eric was right. But he's protective of his friend. I would judge Otis for not being more upset by this, you know? If I found out that a friend who had been actively bullied, it's not like he was somebody who was just kind of a dick to you. This man sought you out to push you around and like take shit from you and humiliate you. I understand 100%, and that was also sort of my feeling on it. And Eric really pushes back and is upset at what Otis is saying, but eventually it does sort of sink in for him that if there is a person who is only willing to see him like on the DL, maybe that isn't a real healthy position. And it feels like he's still not totally of that mind until they're driving back and he sees Adam and waves to him and Adam doesn't respond. And then he seems to like realize, oh, we're not even like in public exactly. There were only a couple people in the car with me and he still won't even acknowledge me. Yeah, I can't do that. And to that I say, good for you, Eric. Like, we all know Adam is going through some shit, but that's not Eric's responsibility. That's what's so difficult about the human experience, is learning like the difference between being there for somebody and letting yourself get treated badly. It's really hard to know sometimes where to draw the line. And we, especially women, get told that we're supposed to like help make men better. Notice when women are, quote, damaged goods, that's supposed to be the sign for men to run. But if men are damaged goods, women are supposed to recuperate them, which I'm just like, suck 1,000 dicks. That's not my job. Recuperate yourself. So yeah, although I do think that were Adam to work through his shit, he'd be a better match for Eric than Raheem is. It's gonna be a minute before he's anywhere near that. You know, he's just not there right now. He has his own things to deal with. And there is a point at which I think being in a relationship is a mistake for people. If they have too much that they are trying to cope with on their own. He hasn't even admitted that he's gay. And I was thinking that he might be bi, but based on the way this episode goes, it seems Adam's gay. And he just can't even like admit that to himself. It's really tough. So then we have the thing with Otis, and what Eric says to Otis is basically, I don't know why you keep pretending to be in love with Ola when like everybody knows you're in love with Maeve, which again, 100%. And Otis doesn't even, because Eric comes to the conclusion of what's healthy on his own. He gets told how Otis feels, but he eventually sees the evidence for himself and really faces it. Otis doesn't do that. Otis pushes back and claims that he loves Ola in the end. Like, tells her to his face, I love you. To which Ola laughs out loud. And he's like, why are you laughing? And she says, because you don't love me. And it's really a great moment of, there's no hard feelings on it. She's just like, dude, come on. No, you don't. And, man, you guys, have you ever been on the receiving end of an I love you from somebody that you're like, that's not true? Because I have, and it's real weird. I never, like, I didn't know how to deal with it, what to say back. It was just, it's really weird. And Otis winds up being dumped and just really upset over it. And it's such an interesting moment of like, God, dude, if you could just be honest with yourself for a second, this wouldn't be so painful for you. But you are refusing to acknowledge your reality at all. And it's really weird. I have to think it's because he's trying so hard to not be like his father. Because he sees the front desk girl leaving his dad's room and knows right away. And it's like, oh, okay, so Delilah didn't leave you. You cheated, didn't you? And that is why you're here, and realizes the whole thing. So I'm assuming that he turns the corner to try and make things work with Ola because he feels that leaving her for somebody else is going to make him too much like his dad. But it wouldn't, because you're not cheating on her. You know, dude? Like, deciding that you're going to break up with her because you are more interested in somebody else is a totally different scenario than stringing the one girl along and continuing to see the other girl behind her back. It doesn't have to be that way. But, you know, it's just, he's clearly just hasn't come to grips with the fact that as cool as Ola is, they are not a good match for one another. And this leads to the whole thing with Ola, where she is beginning to realize that she has feelings for Lily. And it's an ongoing dream. She has more than once. And I was very delighted by it personally, because like last episode, I thought that there was really, a spark between the two of them. But I was concerned because Lily had not given us any indication that she was particularly interested in girls. And also, even if she had, Ola is a friend. So, you know, it's every possibility that just because she's, you know, interested in girls doesn't mean that she would be open to Ola, especially considering that she is still friendly with Otis, and that is sort of a difficult thing to date a friend's ex as much as you may be a casual friend. So, yeah, Ola struggles with that a lot this episode, and there's a scene in the convenience store with her and Adam where she's trying to talk to him about whether or not the dream means anything. Adam is so like aggressively performative with his heterosexuality that it has to raise some fucking questions for her, but she's not focused on him right now. And he finally says, just ask Google like everybody else. So she's clearly taking a quiz about what her different like preferences indicate about her. And she gets pansexual, which is, and this is an interesting thing because a lot of people, including myself, have run up against like, what's the difference between pansexual and bisexual? And what I have heard, and this is again, something that I've gotten some pushback on from some people and other people say is correct. As she says in this episode, pansexuality is being attracted to the human being and not the genitals. You have no interest, like your interest is in the person and who they are, and what their body is much, much more secondary. Whereas somebody who is bisexual tends to go for people who are male or female gendered specifically. Pansexual gender is not a factor at all because there aren't just two genders. So it seems like, based on what I have been reading, bisexuality is a binary gender preference. Again, I could be wrong about this. Correct me if I am. And pansexuality is one of those things that I like really admire because I feel like it's a much more elevated way of seeing the world. But I am super duper not there. Like the package is fairly important to me, you know, and I don't know if that's like a personal failing, which I feel like it sometimes I think it is. And then there are times where I'm just like, oh, we like what we like. I don't know. But yeah, so she is obviously very drawn to Lily, and she goes running over there after she dumps Otis. And tells Lily, I'm going to kiss you now, okay? And Lily nods, so she gives consent. But when Ola kisses her, Lily doesn't really have a great reaction like during. There was some chemistry, but it was just sort of... I was aware that her body language wasn't hugely welcoming. And then she pulls away from Ola and says, I have a lot of homework to do, and literally closes the door in her face, which is cold-blooded, Lily. Damn. And I'm really curious about her reaction here, because I'm assuming she either isn't attracted to girls, and she really didn't know what Ola meant when she said, I'm going to kiss you right now. Is that okay? And she didn't get it. She is attracted to girls, and she doesn't really know how to cope with that. Or this has just brought up a whole thing, and she doesn't even know what to do with it, and she needs some time alone to sort it out. Which I wouldn't blame her for that either, you know? None of these things are really something that I would blame her for. It comes out of left field, you know? It makes sense that she would be a little bit caught off guard and not really know how to handle it. I wish that she hadn't been so incredibly, like, cold in after it was over, but gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. And personally, I'm hoping that she's open to things, because I think that they would be really cute together. But if she decides that she's not into Ola, I wonder what this will mean for Ola to have, like, dumped Otis in favor of somebody. And that's not to say that she left Otis for Lily, because she didn't. She tells Otis, I don't think we're a good match. We're meant to be friends. We're just too different. I think that dumping him was the right thing to do, and I think she knows that, whether or not Lily is receptive to her. But I am interested, if Lily doesn't want to be in a relationship, where Ola is going to go next, who she's going to become interested in next, you know? Let's see. Ashleigh says, see, that's the thing. As a bi, pansexuality confuses me because no one goes around being attracted to genitals. It's the people anyway. And that's what bi meant until more recent years, where there's been a lot more understanding about the binary and lack thereof. These days, it's the two in bi often means your gender and other genders. I'm not sure about the last sentence, but I think I get what you mean. And actually, no one goes around being attracted to genitals. It's the people anyway. That's true. And that's true to a point. And this is where I get myself really, like, I become very judgmental of myself. Because, full disclosure, I really love dick. I love it a lot. I love how it looks. I love sucking on dick. I really love dick. And this has been something that I have been really struggling with, because there has been a real sort of, like, surge of people claiming that preferring a particular genital type is transphobic. And I think they're probably right. And yet I definitely have a preference. And I don't really know where I sit with that, because I do not want to be a transphobe, but I also really love me some dick. So I have a hard time reconciling feeling like I would like to be a better person in this respect and for it to not matter. But no, that it does matter to me. Like, it does. So saying that I'm not attracted to the genitals is, like, true in a way, but also untrue in a way for me personally. And it's just been something that I've been really thinking a lot about and sort of trying to, like, figure out what that says about me, you know, and what that means as somebody who, I don't give a shit what other people do. This is just about me. But nevertheless, it says something. There's some sort of, like, bias there, you know? So yeah, it's been something that's been really on my mind lately. It's like, feeling sort of self-conscious knowing that about myself. Ashley says, I don't know. I guess this is where my bi-ass gets confused. I just don't get that. And yeah, I've heard the label of bisexuality itself being called transphobic because a lot of people see it as only being attracted to cis people, which is absolutely not where I come to it. It's just a label I'm more personally comfortable with. I don't know. Yeah, and, you know, like, I'm not even sure saying that I love dick that I am saying just cis men. I just feel like when I imagine trying to have a sexual relationship with somebody who has a vagina, there's like, I have no response to it. There's no attraction. There's nothing. It's just like, it's not even like I feel repulsed or anything. It's just like, no, I'll pass. Like, you know, just that kind of feeling. So I don't know. It's just something that I really haven't got a grip on, pun intended. But that's where I come from on it. And I try and be honest about where I'm coming from because I don't want to pretend to be a more enlightened, elevated person than I am. It's potentially something that I'll look back on in a few years and be like, oh, I don't feel that way again at all anymore, you know, but I don't know, I might, and I don't really know what that means. So anyway, this whole thing with her realization, I mean, it's certainly good for her to have come to the conclusion that gender doesn't seem to matter to her at all. And that opens things up a lot for her at this school, like in terms of dating. But I really just hope, because Lily has been sort of her only friend, other than Otis, that her kissing Lily didn't ruin the friendship. I hope that she hasn't alienated Lily. You know, I really hope. Yeah, I'm curious. I really don't know where Lily is on this, like, mentally. So, also, he told Maeve that he doesn't think he can see her anymore. And I don't know how he can just go ahead and take that back after you say something like that. You know, I mean, here's the thing, is Maeve has abandonment issues. So, whether or not he takes it back, he was willing to do it at all. And that's sort of it. You know, if you are somebody who has abandonment issues and a person that you have feelings for not only decides not to be with you, but is prepared to cut off all contact for the sake of the person they are actually with, that's fucking drastic. And I don't see him being able to do a take-backsies with her and have that be effective at all. I just think that he would have to do the kind of explaining that Maeve isn't normally open to. Maeve isn't great at listening to people explain themselves because she is so eager to keep herself from being hurt that she would rather not hear it and just go on as she has been than give anybody the benefit of the doubt. And I'm not really even blaming her for that. You know, it's understandable considering. And this episode, she's really struggling with her own deal with her mother, who her mom is trying so hard to get Maeve to forgive her. And this is really tough because, and I was talking about this on the previous episode I was recording, The Haunting of Hill House, but addiction is such an evil thing because people are doing things they wouldn't normally and that they don't want to be doing for the sake of this hunger that they don't have control over. And they do have control over their choices to an extent, but not as much as I think a lot of us wish they did. I think those who haven't experienced addiction just don't really know what it's like to feel so compulsive. And the thing with her mother is that she's manipulative. And Aaron, buys this little doggy outfit for their, or was it a cat outfit? I don't even remember, for their neighbor to try and get her to like preemptively agree to babysitting. And Maeve says something about how it's emotionally manipulative, and she says she knows and that she's an evil genius and sort of laughs it off. But then she invites Maeve to a NA meeting that is like friends and family. And basically puts Maeve on the spot in front of everyone to try and manipulate her into forgiving her mother. It's really awful to watch, because when she starts off saying she's really angry with me and I understand that and I will never forgive myself for abandoning you and your brother, I was like, okay. And then she does, but I do also want her to know it has not been easy for me either. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because as soon as you begin to do that, the apology isn't an apology anymore. That undermines all of it. You can, I would almost even say, you could still say it if that came before the apology. Because if you say, look, things have not been easy for me. I have had I've been in a lot of bad situations. But I understand why you're so angry with me, and I will never forgive myself for abandoning you. If you even change the order of it, it's slightly more of an apology. But instead, she starts off well, and then veers completely left into how hard it's been for her. And look, what Maeve says isn't entirely fair either. Because Maeve says all of that was just excuses. You weren't in bad situations. You made bad choices. And to an extent, sure. But I heard something recently that has really stuck with me. And it was a woman talking about privilege. And the suggestion a lot of people have of like, well, you're responsible for your own choices, make better choices. And she said that when people compare situations, they'll say, well, he made good choices. And she always stops and points that out to them. He had good choices, which I think is a really important distinction. And that's not to say that somebody isn't responsible for themselves at all. But we do need to acknowledge that everybody isn't given the same list of options as each other. And based on where Maeve lives, it seems like they probably don't have a ton of money to go towards getting rehab. And I don't know what the situation is for healthcare where they are. It's not even clear that they're in England necessarily, so I don't know. But like, if you have a problem with addiction in the United States, good luck. Getting help is expensive. And nobody, like, when you take time to go to a facility and you have a gap in your time of working, trying to get a new job, especially if you have any like arrests on your record or anything so that you can get back on your feet, people don't want to hire you. People don't trust you. The whole thing with drug testing in the first place is meant to be an indicator of whether you're a trustworthy person to hire, because having drugs in your system is an indicator that you might steal to fuel an addiction, which is just like, there's just so much built into the system to keep people down who are already struggling. So, like I said, with Maeve's situation, her mother abandoning her, that is a choice outside of drug usage in a lot of ways. It's influenced by drug usage, but it's still separate. So Maeve has every right to be as angry as she is. I'm not trying to take that away from her at all. But I do think that simply saying, well, those are the choices you made, can be oversimplistic. That's all. So I am just, this moment where she just tells her, you are unbelievable, and she gets up and leaves, I really appreciated. And what happens is, previous episode, she had caught those two brothers who had moved in next door stealing a propane tank, and there was this whole confrontation where she got painted as this villain. But this episode, she is walking out of the NA meeting, and the two brothers are heading into this community center, I think it is, something like that. And the one in the wheelchair, and if you guys want to help me with a name, feel free, knocks all of these books off his lap and makes a very exaggerated, like, oops, to get her to come and help him. And Isaac, thank you, Ashleigh. And there's kind of a back and forth with him where he gets her to come into this, like, dance lesson thing with seniors. And they have a pretty good bit of, like, chemistry between them. And I don't mean, like, romantically. I just mean conversationally, because he is also very sarcastic and has no interest in, like, sympathy. He doesn't want pity, and neither does she, for sure, even though they're both in difficult situations. And yet they have a bit of a moment later where he's talking about her mother, and he says something like, once an addict, always an addict. And sort of, it's unclear to me whether he means it or whether he's trying to push her to see how hard she's being on her mother. I don't know if it could be the second one, because I don't know how much he knows about how Maeve is with her mother. Him trying to push her to see it would indicate that he knows, and I don't know that he does. So I can't decide on that. But whatever it is he intends, the result is Maeve, it feels like she's sort of hearing what she says come out of somebody else's mouth and realizes how it sounds. Which, guys, let me tell you, there is nothing like realizing how you sound to someone else. And it's a really difficult thing to accomplish. You would think somebody like me, who literally records a podcast and listens to myself when I edit every day, that I would have a better understanding. But every time I listen to myself, I'm hearing my own voice and remembering what I was thinking at the time. And so I have all this context in my head that I still feel about it the way that I did, as long as not too much time has passed, you know. But when somebody else repeats back to you what they heard you say, and I specifically phrase it as what they heard you say, not what you said, but what they heard you say, that shit can be really devastating, because you don't realize what they heard. And you wouldn't have realized it if they didn't fucking say that shit to you just now. And sometimes you really thought you were coming across as funny, and it was so hurtful. Or you really thought you were coming across as helpful, and instead you were deeply critical and judgmental. Or you thought you were coming across as relatable, but instead you were making it all about you. And there is just really nothing like those moments in life of stepping back and realizing that you haven't been communicating the way you thought, or that what you have been communicating exactly what you think, and what you think is fucked up, you know, and or just not having faith. And I think that's what it is with Maeve. Part of her does expect her mom to fuck up again. But it's one thing to be mentally prepared for that. And it's another thing to say to somebody, I have no faith in you. You will never be different or better. She can feel that way in her heart of hearts all she wants. But does she want to be out here saying that shit to somebody? as angry as she is, what does that accomplish? Because she's still letting her mother stay with her. You know, she's still allowing her into her life to a point. So if you're doing that, you can't have that attitude about it, or else it's going to be a disaster. So, yeah, this moment gets her to stop, and she steps away from him and calls him a dick. And then she goes home, and her mother's there, and her mom is crying, and is just like, look, you're right. You're right about everything. And nothing that you say to me is going to make me feel worse than I already do. Which is the kind of thing that, like, I think when you hear that, people interpret it a lot of the time as, like, I don't want you to tell me what I did wrong because I don't want to hear it. It feels that way. But if you've dealt with people who are even, like, just going through depression, it can be so true. They are aware of how they've let you down, you know? They are aware of the fact that they haven't been present, or that they have been forgetful or just difficult. And you trying to communicate to them how you've been feeling about it, it's not telling them anything they don't know already. They are aware. And oftentimes telling them is just reinforcing, like, oh yeah, I knew I was garbage. I knew that I had fucked up and ruined everything. And now you're telling me that's true. And I knew it, you know. That said, you have the right to tell somebody how you're feeling about their behavior. It's, again, such a difficult balancing act. And here, I think Maeve has made it very clear. She's talked about how she feels to her mom enough times that this felt valid to me. And Maeve sits down with her mom, and she has this little makeup bag filled with, like, all of these nail polishes. And she asks her mother to do her nails for her. And that is her extending a bit of an olive branch in trying to reforge a relationship of some kind between the two of them. And it's really sweet. And I hope to God that her mom doesn't fucking burn her again, because I just can't take it. I can't. So this brings us to the last two characters. Maureen, if I'm not mistaken, Adam's mother, and Jean. So Jean has a blow up with Jakob. Jean, she's trying to she's having a vagina workshop. And she is angry because Jakob is in the midst of, like, a construction thing that she did not ask for in the house. And when she asks that he be done by the time she starts work, he says he will, but he is not. And again, you guys, I said it last time, and I stand by this. She is not wrong at all, and Jakob is being incredibly inconsiderate and invasive. And nothing about her requests or her attitude is out of line until she really flips out later on. But honestly, she has been so reasonable in her requests that the fact that he has ignored her, I'm not even really that mad that she flips out either. She's works from home, and she let him know before this started that this was happening. She did not ask for the pan shelf. Whether or not her pans actually fit, not the point, dude. You don't live here. And she has a job that she's trying to do. Team 100% Jean. Jakob is way out of line. Like, really. And what winds up happening is that in the midst of this argument, when he tries to say, because her sort of overall gripe comes to the surface here, which is basically that she can't get away from him, that he is everywhere, that his stuff is everywhere. He responds with, "We are in a relationship," to which she says, "I kissed Remi." And it was just like, it was so frustrating because I felt like the show really wanted me to see her as the bad guy. And look, her kissing Remi is very disappointing. I'm not trying to pretend that was fine. But Jakob is, like, super not listening, and he is just not being considerate at all. And it's really frustrating to watch because, dude, she has been more than clear this is what gets me. It's like guys can act like women are so fucking inscrutable. And it's like, we'll straight up tell you what we want and you ignore us and then act like we're ridiculous. Like, she's literally as clear as crystal. What do you want from her? So that's that. And he winds up just leaving after she tells him that she kissed Remi. And I don't know if that means they're broken up or what, but we'll see. And then she goes back into her office with these ladies, and one of them is Maureen, who she tells, I'm going to give you something that can help with your 6-year-old bicycle, because Maureen's doing this whole like, well, what if you haven't ridden your bike in 6 years? Will it be rusty? And it turns out that she gave her like a little bullet vibrator. So she sends Maureen home with that. She uses it in the bathroom, has an orgasm, obviously is like so delighted and relieved to be able to have an orgasm still, because she was genuinely concerned her shit has shut down, which is wild to me that people think that can happen, but like, I guess. And she goes out to buy some groceries and comes home and starts putting away some mangoes in a bowl on the table in front of her husband, who checks the receipt and says that they are far too expensive without even like looking at her once. And she just puts her bag down and says, I want a divorce, and walks away. And I swear to God, you guys, it was like Christmas. I was so delighted. I did not expect that shit at all. Later on, Adam overhears her telling him, I didn't say you have to move out. I just said that I want a divorce, which is a really interesting thing, because the show, I love that they're doing this. This happens where it's like, I don't want to be married to you anymore, but I also don't want anything to really change. And I will tell you what, I have been there. Owen and I decided that we were going to get a divorce like a year before I even left. Maybe not quite a year, but it was a while, because I didn't have the money to leave. I didn't even have a job. And so we were planning to just basically keep living. Oh, Brendan. Thank you, Ashleigh. But we were planning to just keep living together while I found a job and saved up money to move out. But like, even though we had agreed to divorce, we were still sleeping in the same bed, living in the same house. Like, you know, nothing actually changed substantively but our decision. And if not for the fact that I got involved with Owen and Brendan found out and flipped and I left, I don't know how long it would have been before something really did change. We were sort of forced into it. And in some ways, I think that I got involved with Owen purposefully to split up me and Brendan faster. But who knows how long it would have gone on. So I kind of understood her, even though it feels really, like it doesn't make sense and it's counterintuitive. Her saying, I want a divorce, but I don't want you to leave. I get what she means, you know? It's tough. Your whole life changes, especially when you're with somebody for as long as they've been together. Like, I was only with Brendan, I think, a total of like 7.5 years. If you've been with somebody as long as they clearly have, it looks like almost 20 years. That's a massive shift in your whole life. So, you know, and I don't think she has a job. So how does she pay for the house? How does she keep things going when he leaves? That can be a major factor in marriages dragging on for longer than they should, because people don't have the resources or the inclination to change their lifestyle. And I can understand that. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. Oh, wow. Ashleigh says, I guess more given they have an adult daughter who's out of the house. I completely forgot about that. I completely forgot about her. Ooh, I wonder if we'll meet her. Curious. All right, I'm over time, so I really have to go. But thank you again to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode and for joining me in the chat. And thank you to everybody else for hanging out in the chat with me. Hope you are enjoying the coverage. And I will be seeing you very soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.